Good morning. Please turn with me to Luke, the 6th chapter. Luke, the 6th chapter will really start out at the end of the 5th as we look at the subject this morning. What? See, now I got to explain it to everybody. Right? It's Easter Sunday. Well, look, it's probably a good thing. I'm a lot more drained today. And so I explained two things. I might not be as inclined to hit the table, but just in case. And then two, I'm going to be more telling more of the story. So as I say from time to time, it's going to be more incumbent upon y'all to actually look at the scriptures. They might just be scrolling behind my head today. I don't know which ones I'll actually settle in on. But for those who haven't been here before, this is thanks to the Andrews family. Something that was really effective last week in keeping me from banging on the communion table while I'm preaching. You heard that right there, right? Couldn't even hit it right there. But the whole great expectations thing, how does that even fit into an Easter Sunday? Well, it might not, but the reason why I think it might is one of the things that we think about is our brother has already directed our attention to the sacrifice of the Christ. This is a time when we say thank you to the Christ for his sacrifice, but the practical lesson of his life we often say is in what does that mean for how I'm supposed to live out mine? And so right now when we talk about great expectations, that reminds me of the whole concept of faith. Because one of the battles that they have in terms of their faith is, especially with his disciples, trying to get them to appreciate all that is possible. And in life, if you've lived it for very long, it's going to take you to some places where you might have a mix of great expectations, but then reality might have beaten you down into some places where your expectations are not what they used to be, if you're anything like me. And so what it seems that Christ is doing in this set of chapters we're looking at, roughly 5 to 12 and even 14, is trying to get them not to set their expectations either too high or too low, but to help them understand where God's expectations are for them so that they are not limiting themselves and giving up on having great expectations out of life, because we're still supposed to aim high, but to understand how you don't exhaust yourself in all of the things that are going to challenge your ability to maintain great expectations. And what's going to happen in this set of chapters, the reason why I included 14, is Luke's gospel. This is the third time we've been through the story of his life, so it's easy to make it real redundant. But each of these narrators, authors, people sometimes who have actually walked with Christ, Luke not necessarily being one, they're giving us a nuance on his life. And one of the things that caught my attention, I've seen it in the past, but probably caught my attention more than any other time, that we don't see necessarily in Matthew, that we don't necessarily see in Mark, and may not see in John, is the number of times, we talked about it on Wednesday, he's having dinner with the Pharisees. And over this set of 7, 9 chapters, he's going to have dinner with the Pharisees 3 different times, as he is basically helping us to understand it's already started to go south. And so in our lives, there are times when relationships might have already started to go south, but he's given us an indication of how he continues to try, because he has reasonable, not just reasonable, great expectations about everybody we're going to have a chance to dine with, we're going to be on happy terms with. And if we are, we're not very evangelistic, right? Not just as Christians, just as people. And so God willing, one of the things that we get out of the life of Christ is helping us to understand situations where we are hopefully able to make the most out of otherwise uncomfortable interactions. Because 3 times we're going to look today in chapter 7, chapter 11, and chapter 14. He's having dinner with the Pharisees, and it ain't all good. We're going to see why, because we'll just see. It actually begins back in chapter 5 of Luke. Chapter 5 of Luke. Because that whole concept of healthy expectation starts in the way in which he has already had the beginning of, kind of a rocky start with some of the questions that he's fielding from them, understanding that he's already started to do great things. It's gotten a lot of attention, but it's starting to raise some questions, and he's not upset with the questions as long as they keep a healthy tone. And so in verses 17 through roughly 26, they're going to question whether or not this man who has begun to do a whole lot of healings has gone too far and stepped out of his lane when he's starting to talk about forgiving sins. He's not going to get angry or frustrated. He's just going to answer their question, because in verses 27 through roughly 32, now they're going to start to question his company. Who is it that he is is it really good for him to spend time around? He's going to start getting criticism and questions about the company he's keeping. As in verses 33 through the end of the chapter 5, 39, are going to start to raise questions about the company he's keeping in the form of his own disciples. And the thing that I noticed this time about those questions is at 2 points it seems that they are setting their expectations higher than where God has them. And that's the key in my life. The older I get, the more I realize that I have not set my own expectations in a place where I can just basically flat out, if I'm really thinking, expected to be disappointed, is when I set my expectations running ahead of taking a solid, and we sometimes say sober account of where God is. And so when they are questioning whether or not he has the authority to forgive sins, I realize that in my life I am at my best when I am looking at people understanding how little I understand them. Understanding that I am not tempted. What's going to happen is they're going to be tempted to put him in a box that's based upon their expectations. Not realizing that we've already talked about the fact that he is getting to the root cause of some things. And so I'm at my best when I am listening and learning in certain circumstances. I had a chance to go to a memorial service this weekend. I was not doing the memorial service. I was attending the memorial service, and I got a chance to see how someone else did it. And I learned a lot by watching an older man conduct a memorial service in a very delicate situation. It was a suicide. A situation I've never had to deal with that before, right? We've talked in the past about how we got some good doctors here, one of great psychologists who pulls some of the counselors from the area together to talk to some of us preachers as how we can deal better with suicide. But I've never had to do a service like that. And so instead of going in and being like, man, if I would have done it like this or that, no, I just got the chance to learn because he did an exceptional job. I got to hear during the course of him helping this family through that process, the fact that it came up over and over as people got up to speak. We've all been through this. Maybe not the suicide, but we've all been through this time when we had to say goodbye to a loved one, right? And so that is what I got a chance to see. I got a chance to grow up listening to somebody else this weekend. And so that's what's happening. If I give myself a chance to listen to other people, even if they're running in the same lane I'm running in, then I'm making the most out of what God has done and given us a body or a collective of people to rely on. Because we've said it before, I can't teach any better than what I've learned and what I'm willing to listen to. And so I got a chance to be reintroduced again to the concept of being able to learn. The older I keep saying the older I get, I don't know about you. Whatever you're good at or whatever you're assigned to do, sometimes it just feels better to just sit and listen. Just sit and listen to other people do it. It's what we used to call continuing education. Every now and again, Mama will talk about how we have different folks who are in education, right? And even the teachers have seminars that they have to go to. And sometimes I'm guessing it's just a relief to have a day off and be taught by other teachers, to get a chance to understand what it's like when you don't have to be on all the time. And so that's one of the things that's happening here. He's trying to help them understand because it's not just them. It's going to be his disciples as well. Because what he's going to do is after they're getting a chance to understand where, this time it's the Pharisees, where the Pharisees are missing out because they're setting their expectations on something that is really giving them the chance to actually learn if they're willing to fix their perspective on the Christ. Instead of learning, they're condemning the things that he's doing because it's outside of their expectations. So same thing. By the time we get to verses 27 through 32, once again, they're limiting their understanding of who is it he's supposed to be interacting with. Now, it's a legitimate question. The Bible literally says, doesn't it? Bad company corrupts good morals. So you got to be careful of your company, but you have to also understand when you're watching a more experienced preacher do it, right? And so in certain circumstances, it would have been easy for me to tune that gentleman out because he doesn't worship with us. But I got a whole lot of wisdom by tuning into the wisdom that he's had along his walk and looking for the similarities in where it is that we believe, right? Not necessarily trying to become more like him, but trying to add to my toolbox or my tool belt. But understanding we ain't got to be the same for me to learn from you. Said it all the time, it's a dead horse issue. But because I got a chance to learn it again and I'm seeing it in the scriptures, he's helping me understand how I need to, like we said before, one of the reasons why what Titus does is so important, and Jake and everybody else who comes up here and talks to the little kids, if we're allowing ourselves, we're not just teaching the little kids, it's, as another one of our brothers said, it's iron sharpens iron. And I don't see no age on that whole iron sharpens iron thing. There are things we're learning even, learning even from the young people, if we allow them to teach us as we are trying to teach them. And so that's one of the things we're seeing. They're setting their expectations for the Christ in a way that is not allowing them to learn all of the things that he is trying to show them. But it's not just limiting expectations, it's setting too high an expectation. So what they're going to do in verses 33 through the end of the chapter is they're going to be like, wait a minute, our disciples are fasting, John's disciples are fasting, why aren't your disciples fasting? And so it's not just one thing. There are times in life when I'm at my worst, when I'm saying, just because I'm going through it this bad, everybody else needs to, right? But that's not everybody. Not everybody's in my season of life, right? Not everybody is in my level of trial. There are some people who are in a situation, if God put them in the exact level of stress that I'm under, they don't get a break because they just came out of that season already. And so I need to open my mind to the fact that God has taken different people through different things at different times. And that's what's happening here. They don't realize that the season that they're in, they have the Christ, so they need to celebrate. The Christ isn't going to be there always. And so they're going to fast in due season. It's not like they have a lighter road. As a matter of fact, they're going to have pretty much a heavier road. Why? Because Christ pretty soon is going to start telling them it's not only him that they're going to miss. His exit is going to depart, in a lot of ways, mark their own. Because they got to cross the pickup too. And so there are sometimes when you see somebody in a season of life where it seems like they might be taking it easy, it's one thing if that's all they're planning to do. But sometimes they need a break because the things that are ahead for them are overwhelming. And I guarantee you, I wouldn't want to trade places with them. So I just need to encourage them, God willing, that maybe I can learn from the season of life that God has them in as well. And set healthy expectations, not only for myself, but as we said before, so that I am not getting in the way of people who are having to carry their cross too. I can't begrudge a brother who's on or a sister who's on a break in a season where mine's getting pretty heavy. God willing, they're an encouragement to me that that's a little bit of what might be ahead for me if I just go a little bit further. And so God willing, perspective helps me set my expectations in the right place. If I'm not looking at them as a rival, but a place I might get to, right? If I'm looking at my brother from the right perspective, if I'm looking at my sister from the right perspective. And that gets us into chapter 6, which is going to mark a shift. Because it's one thing if I have unhealthy expectations for you. It's another thing if I'm trying to hold you accountable according to my faulty expectations. And that's where it's going to make a shift. Because by the time we get to chapter 6, they're going to start asking about the Sabbath. And it didn't click with me until this time. There's something different about the questions about the Sabbath. And why is that? Why is it? This is a real question. Anybody? It's not fair. I just saw this stuff. But what's happening is those are death penalty questions. And so it's going out of the lane of, hey, just curiosity, wondering, why do you guys hang out with all those guys? Why is it that you're trying to forgive sins when that just seems like it's a little too much? Why is it this and this and that? Why aren't you all fasting? Now they're low-key starting to ask him questions and get him killed. And he understands the difference in tone. And the reason why that's so important is by the time it gets to dinner, it's going to seem like he's snapping pretty quick. And it's going to seem like he's getting real angry over nothing. But the challenges to his life, if you're really paying attention, they're starting right here in chapter 6 before he even goes into dinner in chapter 7. And so as we go into chapter 7, like I said, we're just going to keep moving. This is the famous story halfway through the chapter in verse 36 of the sinful woman who was forgiven. And we're going to get the introduction too, of course. He's going to have dinner with the Pharisees, even though we've already started to see it's not great with them right now. But as we said, one of the beautiful things about a relationship with God is that he treats us each according to our ways. And so he is not casting all of the Pharisees out just because he's had a problem with a few. We've seen that already. But here we'll get a chance to see him take the invitation offered by one that gets a name, Simon. As verse 36 is going to say, one of the Pharisees asked him to eat with him, and he went into the Pharisee's house and took his place at the table. And behold, a woman of the city who was a sinner, when she learned that he was reclining at table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of ointment. And standing behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, wiped them with the hair from her head, and kissed his feet and anointed them with ointment. Now, when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this was who was touching him, for she is a sinner. We'll go ahead and pause right there, because he's going to go ahead and turn the question on the gentleman. But that whole concept of touching is one of those low-key themes that we have talked about in Christ's ministry that seems to come through a little bit more clearly, at least to me and Luke, having been through the story of his life a couple of times. He is not simply healing people physically. We've talked about it before. He is restoring people to community. Understanding that if you go through trouble for long enough, you can become an outcast in the community. And so he's going out of his way to touch or allow himself to be touched by people who were, you can see the judgment right here. I'm not making that part up, right? It's manifest, and he's going to see through it. But he's also touching the lepers. The lepers were legally unclean. And it wasn't just legally, it was dangerous to touch them because you could get it. Before I went to the mission field, one of my favorite stories that challenged me in terms of, okay, you think you're going to the mission field, but how dedicated are you really? Because there is a priest by the name of, I forget his name, but he worked on the island of Molokai. I think it's one of the Pacific islands. And it was a leper's island. And it helped me understand how to put myself in, basically, in sober judgment about what I was going to do. Because the question was, are you really as committed as Father such and such? And I know he doesn't worship with Church of Christ, but this is a man who didn't just die on the mission field. He died of leprosy. Thank you. Because he moved there, he got the leprosy, and he died with the people that he went to help. And every time I stepped out on my bed on the mission field, I'm not, what's his name, right? Not to be rude. But I don't have that. I haven't made that level of sacrifice. And that's important because that's a tool that Jesus is going to use when he is trying to help his own apostles stay off of the path that says, I can set my expectations here without even considering where Jesus or where God has set his expectations for myself and for this person. And so that's one of the things that helps to keep us in what we call sober judgment is a term that's going to come up over and over in the Bible. When I start to see, we in life, we have the opportunity to pick, like I talked about this week, people to look up to. Sometimes in just a moment, sometimes over a lifetime. We call them mentors sometimes. When I look at the stories of the martyrs, people who weren't just missionaries, but people who consciously put themselves in danger and ended up actually dying from the danger that they saw was ahead. I just have to admire them and realize that their story is basically setting the bar at a level of sacrifice above what I had to make, at least at that time, right? And so when you look at a follower of Molokai, you look at the situation where Jesus is touching people. He is not just healing them physically. One of the things that I saw in the story of that man, that priest, not everybody was willing to go to that island and minister in that way, is he helped to raise the level of hope of the people on that island. It wasn't just a vain gesture, and I'm just going because I'm that dedicated. I'm sacrificing life and limb. There was a point behind it. He was helping people who had lived in a hopeless situation because even amongst their own people, that was the island where they sent the lepers. So he went to give the lepers some hope again as they were in a situation that was otherwise hopeless. And see, in this situation, Jesus could fix it. How much more do I have to admire a man who can't fix it? He's just willing to jump in, and if it's possible, if it's necessary, to die with you. Good Lord. And so that is one of the things that helps me understand what Jesus is doing here. He is going to a place where people have not only been physically ailing, but they're now socially outcast. And he's restoring not just their physical person, but he is using his, like we say, his influence to help restore them to a place where they just have hope again. And so it's not just that. He's doing the same thing here with the woman here. The woman with the issue of blood, that's another one. That one won't make you sick, but she's ceremonially unclean. Under the law, it was offensive for her to touch him. But he understands he has the power to actually heal her, and so he is not offended by the touch, even though it's technically illegal. And so what he is doing is he is using, one of the things, like I said, one of the reasons why the perspectives are so important to me now in going through these Gospels, even though they're telling the same story, the different perspectives that they give me help me see how, oh, wait a minute, when I see it back to back to back like that in these different chapters, now I'm starting to see the way that he is going beyond physical healing to your emotional and your spiritual well-being. Why? Because one of the other things he's doing over and over is what? He's casting out spirits, and we talked about it before. We've talked about it before. We don't necessarily have the whole concept of casting out demons anymore, but we do still have things that drag our spirits down, unless you just overcome at a level that I haven't. And so the lesson that still comes through for us today is even if he's not physically or personally casting out demons, he still pays as much attention to our spiritual and emotional needs as he does to our material needs. And so that's one of the things that's coming over in that whole concept of he allowed her to touch them. And so that's why he rebukes Simon, because what is happening now in terms of the whole expectations is now Simon is taking the expectations that he has for her external status in the community, and he is viewing her as essentially less forgiven than God. And so now Christ has a dilemma. He's in the man's house. The man's extending hospitality to him. But not every circumstance is going to allow me to keep it cordial with everybody. And one of the things I have to pray for God is to give me is the wisdom to delicately deal with situations when I'm just in a catch-22, because the catch-22 here is if he simply allows Simon to go out with that same perspective on this woman, Simon has the power to really continue to control the narrative. And this woman who has been forgiven by God might go right back out to a situation where she is just as socially ostracized as she was before she was forgiven. And so Jesus is not putting the courtesies to his host ahead of the way that this woman is going to have to live the rest of her days in that society, where this man's misconception about how forgiven she is going to continue to label her even though she is good with God. And so understand in life, a lot of times I am tempted to sit up and just keep it polite and like keep it zipped because it's just easier for me. But I have to understand the way in which sometimes my silence is requiring somebody else to suffer some things that God does not have for them to suffer any longer. And my silence represents in some ways fear. And over time, if I let it become a character trait, it's what we talked about before. Fear over time as a habit becomes cowardice. And we talked about before. Our brother read from Revelation 22. Roundabout then, Revelation 21, when he's talking about the new thing that he's creating, on one of those lists on who doesn't get in, who we said who are the first people who don't get in? It's the murderers, it's the liars, isn't it? It's none of those. Who is it? The fearful, the cowards, some versions say. And stories like this are sobering for me because it's not always like we talk about on the battlefield where our fears are exposed. Sometimes it just helps us to understand how much are we willing to let somebody else suffer unnecessarily. That helps me confront in me a fear that I need to have God help deal with. I've told the story before. I went back to one of my high school reunions. Somebody who was nice to me all through high school. I finally got a new set of friends, people being nice to me that I wasn't able to hang out with before. And that friend who had been true to me from the day one, first day we met in high school, because I had a chance to be with a new set of friends, I pretended like I didn't know them. Wow. It's an embarrassing story I've told before. That's not a high point in the history of Marcus. But I tell that story for a reason. That exposed a fear in me that I needed God to work on. And so ultimately, there are some fears I can try to willpower it away as much as I want. You know, one of the reasons why I like that story is because now when I get shunned, I got to put it into perspective. That's the exact same thing you've done too, bud. And so how can you condemn a person for, I still want to, but you're right. Right? And so it helps me have a measuring stick for how difficult it is to always be loyal to people in every circumstance. So that I can then do that thing, the scripture reading, when it says forgive everybody, right? That becomes a whole lot easier if I stop putting it at the back of my mind. That time I was kind of cowardly too. And I can realize one of the reasons why I need a Holy Spirit is because there ain't enough willpower in the world to keep me courageous in every circumstance. And so when God is exposing those parts of my character that are inclined to wilt, God willing, that's where confession kicks in. Because the less I confess it, the less I'm asking him to help. And the more I'm just operating in my willpower, which is never going to be enough. But with that, understand how that is exactly the place in which he's going to work on his disciples, because they aren't above it either. They're going to wilt too. How do you know? You get to the end of the story. We've heard it already, right? Sorry. Matthew and Mark's gospel. It's basically that whole concept of, Lord, we will never abandon you. No, even if I got to die, Peter said, until they all start to running, right? And so that's why these lessons are important for them too. They're not super apostles. They're not super disciples. They're the 12. They're blessed, but they still need mercy, and that's what he's about to show them, because in chapter 8, he's going to continue speaking in parables, which is going to show that this is not his last interaction with the Pharisees. He's going to continue on, and he's going to accept dinner invitations at least 2 more times. And so he's going to understand, even though he might have dealt gently with Simon, and this might have been a peaceful interaction, the core issue still has not completely changed. And so in my life, in relationships, one of the tough things I have is I make too much of a moment of peace. Instead of understanding with sobriety, the way in which God has given me a moment to help move the relationship forward, I want to make it like nothing ever went wrong and everything's all perfect now. That's another way that I'm setting my expectations in the wrong place. I need God to help me understand, is this moment of peace complete healing? Or do I need to understand how both I and the other person, with which I've had a little bit of a rub, how we're both still growing? Why? Because if I go back into that relationship thinking it's all healed, I'm setting myself up for disappointment, for frustration, and to be just as angry with other people all over again. If I'm thinking you should have been fixed by now, but you're just as human as I am. And so it's one of the reasons why it's so important to understand that a moment of peace is just an opportunity to move, God, what's the best for me to hope for right now in this situation? And to set my expectations for that person around that reasonable expectation from God, as opposed to my temptation, which is I just want it all fixed right now. And if you'll only be this, the person I'm hoping, I'm just setting this whole thing up, right, for more disappointment. And to quite possibly be more harsh on my friends, family, etc., than is reasonable. Because God understands where the relationship is. And I'm wise and I am at my best when I align my expectations for people who I'm starting to heal with in the right place. All right, so with that, he's going to continue to teach in parables because it's not all good with the Pharisees. He's going to realize they have not been completely healed of that desire to have conversation with him because they're looking for Sabbath offenses. They're still looking for death penalty stuff. And so he's still teaching in parables because he's still teaching the truth, but as we said, he's teaching it in a form that they can take. And with that, he is going to go on in chapter 9. In chapter 9, to send out the 12 apostles. The 12 apostles. They're going to be able to do some mighty things, beginning in verse 1. And he called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over the demons and to cure diseases. And he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal. And he said to them, take nothing for your journey, no staff, no bag, no bread, nor money, and do not have 2 tunics. And whatever house you enter, stay there, and from there depart. And wherever they do not receive you, when you leave that town, shake off the dust from your feet as a testimony against them. And they departed and went throughout the villages, preaching the gospel and healing everywhere. Now skip a few verses to verse 10, where it's going to talk about their return. On their return, the apostles told him all that they had done. As he's going to seem to do something that's pretty cold. Because as we saw in a previous description of his life, they are now going to be the ones who are receiving the buzz about all the great works and the miracles. And so the crowd is going to grow, but it's going to create the dilemma that they are now going to be super tired, as Mark described it, because success often breeds more work, right? And so now they're in a situation where they barely have time to eat because they've been so successful. And so what's going to happen is it's the famous story, the feeding of the 5,000. And this is one of the places where God helps me out a whole lot. After success, he helps me measure my, once again, expectations. Because they're doing a whole lot of stuff. They got authority over all the demons. They got authority over, they're casting out all kinds of sicknesses. Realize these guys have lived their lives however many years they had lived. They didn't have this power before. And so sometimes when you come into a new blessing, it requires a level of sobriety. And so the next thing he's going to ask them to do, I never understood it. And even if I do understand it now, he's like, okay, well, we got a whole lot of people. We're being nice to them, but they don't have any food. And so what's he say to them? Feed them. Why did that always seem like an odd question to me, or a challenge? Why are you telling them to feed them? He could have just had them line up and fed them. Why is he challenging them to do it? It's because in life, too often when God gives me something good, I fixate on what I can do, and I'm tempted to blot out or ignore or become blind to all the things, the levels that I still have yet to attain. And so what he seems to be doing is helping them understand, you got power of the demons, bud, you got power of the sickness, feed the crowd. Because there's still levels that you haven't reached yet. And the other thing he is going to do, in addition to helping them refocus to all the places where they need to continue to grow to just in terms of their ability, is one of the reasons why it is so important for us to have a perspective that looks toward the needs of others, is that feeding of the 5,000 is going to be an example of the way he is going to continue to help them focus on the way that as mighty as their gifts are, it's one of those things where he's going to say, the poor you're always going to have with you. It's a persistent source of humility if we allow ourselves to focus on the work that he has called us to do. A lot of times, my brothers say, we've got a lot of folks here who are mission-minded. And sometimes it's good because we think about it for we're doing nice things for other people. But one of the wisdoms that comes out of working with the poor is realizing how inadequate I actually am, how overwhelming the problem actually is. And every time I want to get the big head about something that went right in my life, all I have to do is realize that if I'm in the habit of working in the places that he has sent me, really, then I always have a reason to stay humble. We talked about it before. It's like working out. It's one thing if I decide I'm about to get back to my regimen and I'm going to run Tuesday. That's pretty good. I'm tired. See that next month, right? We'll see the track again next month. It doesn't work that way. That might do well, but at some point I have to make it a routine. And that is one of the advantages to allowing God to push me out into places where I am pushed beyond my limits. Because every day I'm getting my mind and my spirit conditioned to realize that no matter how much he's blessed me, there are still some things that I am lacking in, that I will never be able to get right if he does not show me the way. And that's what's happening in the feeding of the 5,000. He could have just fed them, but he needed them to confront the fact that they couldn't do it. Why? Because in 2 chapters, they're going to be arguing about, once again, we've seen it, who's the greatest? Even after he's humbled them with the feeding of the 5,000. He's going to do it again. It's not just the feeding of the 5,000. He's going to not just knock them down. We mentioned before, when he knocks them down, because Peter's about to be called Satan pretty soon for telling the Christ he can't go to the cross, but he's going to pick him up and take him with him to the Mount of Transfiguration. So he's not just beating him down. He's not just lowering his expectations. He's like, I still love you. Come on, let's just go. Let's travel. Just tone it down a bit. And so after that, they're going to come down from the mountain, and he's going to give them another chance to realize their limitations, because there is a boy with a demon that they're going to meet. The young man's father is going to say, your disciples couldn't cast it out. At which point they're just going to be, I guess, kind of like, but these same guys who were casting out the demons, see, this was one that it's within their wheelhouse. And so there are times in life where the thing that humbles me is the fact that I am running into a problem that is completely within my ability to take care of it, but I didn't realize it until I just had a new set of eyes. Help me realize, oh, wait, Marcus, you didn't, oh, wow. And sometimes it's the simple things that I'm overlooking, that if I'm allowing people in and I'm listening, they're helping me to see what's lacking. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but for me, those are the most humbling moments when I've been through these stories 20 times and I've never seen it. And somebody points out something that was just obviously sitting there on the page that was obvious to them. It's one of the reasons why we talk about brothers and sisters are so important. The kids are so important because the kids can help us refocus on the scriptures that way too. And that's what's happening with his very own apostles. But it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. Like I said, I'm not even going to talk about the time. Because as he goes back to that second dinner we're going to see in chapter 11. We're going to see that in chapter 11, right about verse 37. This is the one that's going to seem like, okay, why is he so mad? Verse 37 beginning. While Jesus was speaking, a Pharisee asked him to dine with him. So he went in and reclined at table. The Pharisee was astonished to see that he did not first wash before dinner. And the Lord said to him, now you Pharisees, and he's going to go off. Please read that on your own time. He is going to issue a number of woes, and they're not happy things. And the reason why we know they're not happy things is the scribes are going to step in about a paragraph beginning about verse 45. And let's just read that. One of the lawyers answered him, teacher, in saying these things, you insult us also. And he said, woe to you lawyers. It's like, just stay quiet, right? And so ultimately what happens is, why is he so mad with them so quickly? Well, understand, back a few chapters ago, he's already under the stress of them low-key, trying to look like they're asking sincere questions, but they're really trying to find reasons to kill him. You back up a little bit further in the same chapter, beginning about verse 14, he's still doing nice stuff for people, casting demons out. Verse 14 of chapter 11. Now he was casting out a demon that was mute. When the demon had gone out, the mute man spoke, and the people marveled, but some of them said, he casts out demons by Beelzebub. That's the stress that he's under. And so when he snaps, it's sometimes what we call the straw that broke the camel's back. And one of the wisdoms that I need in life is the wisdom to look beyond the surface of what a person is presenting. Happily taking my invitation to dinner or wherever it is that they're going. And I'm not praying for God to give me the wisdom to understand what's really going on beneath the smiles and the courtesies and the attempts that they are making to just keep the peace. So sometimes I go too far when I assume that the efforts that they are making to be nice are all that they are going through and they are enduring. And so I can't say that that's exactly what's going on with the Christ, but I can tell you by the time we get to the third dinner in chapter 14, it's going to be pretty much the same thing. He's going to have what seems to be a relatively short fuse. And so one of the things that I'd like to talk about in kind of trying to land the plane on this Easter Sunday, this time, we look at the whole concept of thank you, Christ, for the death that you were willing to suffer, much like that priest on the island of Molokai was willing to embrace a death that involved leprosy. The thing that actually made that death significant was the life that they both chose to live. And so that's the wisdom that we're getting as we're trying to see what is it that Christ was trying to leave with his apostles and everyone else before he went. Because a lot of people died in Israel around this time, but we're not coming to celebrate Easter for the death of John. We're not coming to celebrate Easter for the death of fill in the blank. We're coming to celebrate Easter because of the death, not just the death that Christ lived, but the life that he lived leading up to that death. And it's almost like when you have the blessing to be able to make a last will and testament. His whole life was that last will and testament. Because what we're getting a chance to see are the ways in which he guided his apostles into having a more healthy set of expectations in the life that they were going to have to live once he was, like we said, soon to be gone. Because the story was just beginning for them. And so what's happening is we're getting a chance to see. He's issuing these woes because one of the things he's having them trying to, God willing, help them to understand is when they see him explode on the Pharisees this way, I'm pretty sure the apostles are fearing as well. And they have the need to not withdraw so much that they're no longer asking him questions, but to really try to keep account of, okay, what's he really going through? And so in life, sometimes it's easy for me when, it's a tangent I don't really want to take, but it's easy for me when I'm in a situation where, we talked about it before, I've said something to you. It's one of the reasons why I pray so often, God, help me. Avoid that James problem. He says, if you're a perfect person, then you got control over what you say, and you're always saying the right thing at the right time to the right person. If you got that, I said it before. If you got down like that, I salute you. But I don't. And so one of the places where I continue to need God's guidance, it's not just those situations where he puts me around those who are in need so I can be humbled by the fact that I can't meet all those needs. It's sometimes helping me realize the volume or the frequency with which I stumble in the things that I say. Keep me needing God to guide me and wanting to shut my mouth when it needs to be shut. And that God willing to have the humility to apologize when I messed it up and made it wrong. And so that's one of the things he's helping them to understand because his apostles, the thing that's differentiating them from the scribes, the lawyers, the Pharisees, etc., is not the fact that they're not making any mistakes. It's that they're willing to allow him to correct them gently. And one of the things that he is going to do is after we get through this whole concept of why is he so angry with the Pharisees? Well, and the lawyers. It's that whole concept of over and over. It doesn't literally say it here, but if you go back and look at the corresponding verses, which might be in Matthew 23, over and over, when we saw it in Matthew, he says it's hypocrisy, it's hypocrisy, it's hypocrisy. So the same way that they had higher expectations for who Jesus should be associating with, or higher expectations for what it is that he should do in terms of staying in his lane, healing the folks, but don't that forgiveness thing, I don't know. They had lower expectations for themselves, and that's one of the dangers in not allowing me to, in me not allowing God to help me set my expectations in healthy places. Because one of the things I think we all have in common is I always give myself the benefit of the doubt. I don't know about you. That's another place where I need help. And so if I'm not constantly seeking to ask God to set my expectations in healthy places, I'm always going to be more difficult on you than I am on myself. Until I allow him to reshape me. It's called transformation by the time we get to Romans and what Paul is going to write in Romans. Unless I allow him to transform me out of that habit of setting a lower bar for me than I got for you, then I am going to continue to run into the problem that he has here at dinner with the Pharisees and the lawyers. And the way he helps to get his apostles out of it may begin in verse 1 of chapter 12. In the meantime, when so many thousands of people had gathered together that they were trampling one another, he began to say to his disciples first, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. Nothing is covered up that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. Therefore, whatever you have said in the dark shall be heard in the light, and what you have whispered in the private rooms shall be proclaimed on the housetops. What's his remedy for his apostles? It's you're not going to have the luxury to be a different person in one place than you are publicly. And understand, if I am going to get over that temptation to set two different standards, one for me and one for you, I'm going to have to beg him to do the same thing for me. We're living in a time now when our brothers can tell you. Sometimes we don't have the luxury we used to, some of us, to live as privately as we once did. The surveillance state is putting a whole lot more of us on blast. So there's an upside to that. There's an upside to that. Because the less privacy I have, the more somebody is naturally closing the gap for me. And so whatever I might want to pretend to be, there are a whole lot of people might be, hey, really? Okay. We'll play along, but... And so in every situation, even in the worst of situations, Paul literally says it about God. He works out all things for the good of those who love him and who are called. I'm butchering that. Please look it up on your own time. Do you understand? Who are called according to his purpose? I interpret that as those who are allowing him to transform them. So even if all your business is being put out on blast, understand that's a technique God used with his apostles. It's just helping me become more of what I should want to voluntarily be already. So one of the things I love is the more and more I hear about it. It's one thing if I just say it all the time, but I love the degree to which I'm hearing more people talk about unity and peace and the healing. It seems like it's begun to, God willing, take root. This is one thing he told the parable of the 4 seeds. One thing for it to land along the path, another thing for it to land along the rocks, another thing for it to land along the thorns. But God willing, the healing here has begun to take root in fertile soil. And one of the things he is helping his apostles understand is you're not going to be able to pray the inconsistencies in your character away. There's certain things you just got to get rid of. And I'm going to say it like this and close it out. As men, we understand. When I talk about that, I've been talking about this a little bit more recently. When you're trying to overcome your temptation with looking at pictures we don't need to be looking at, there is no counselors that are going to tell you you're going to be able to get over that problem if you still got a stash somewhere that you can always go back to any circumstance when life gets too tough. They're going to tell, we understand as men, you got to get rid of your stash if you're going to get rid of the problem. The problem is we don't look at our relationships the same way. As long as I allow myself a stash, a place where I can go butcher you behind your back, brother, and then come and be nice, I'm never really going to get there. That's just my firm belief. Because of the way that I see Jesus treating his own apostles. He's not giving them the luxury. He said, whatever you say in the private places, that's going out on blast. So thank you, surveillance state. Let me quit. That's my rabbit hole. Pick your own. But the bottom line is, ultimately, on this Easter Sunday, where, of course, I'm not preaching an Easter message. My question is, God willing, how are you going to allow his death to transform your life? Because God willing, I don't have to, we're all going to go that way one day, right? Just as they were helping me understand at that memorial service. But the thing that makes this Easter matter between your right now and the day of your departure is the same standard that Christ was judged by. The only reason we even care about celebrating his death today is because of the life that he lived. And so on this Easter Sunday, one of the things I'm hoping will happen for all of us is that the life that he lived will help us reevaluate, God willing, the ways in which he is helping us to get practical understanding of the way in which we can go from where we are right now to the kind of healing that God willing has landed on fertile soil. He's given us practical instructions as to how we can close the gap between where we are right now and the healing that he knows is possible with great expectations that are sobered by realistic expectations, the realistic expectations of daily life. And as our brothers and sisters, to a certain degree, I'm sure in private, have mentioned to you already, this is a time we might not get another chance to talk to some folks again. Maybe until this time next year. Maybe we see you out and about. I don't know. But one of the things I don't talk about all the time, because we got brothers who are capable of teaching on that topic, is baptism. And we had a great question this morning from one of our recent brothers who's been baptized about baptism. And one of the things that I sometimes like to say about the whole concept of baptism is when he's challenging us to reevaluate the life that we live from this day forward onto the cross, God willing, allowing our death to have some meaning based upon the life that we live. Baptism is it's like the Lord's Supper. When he said, remember me, did he say, like Passover is a big thing. We had a Passover meal last week one of the churches in town threw. It's a huge thing. There are lessons woven into the Passover that really help you have a deeper understanding of why Christ chose to die at that time. But when he left Passover behind and he said, remember me, he didn't say, if Passover was like that, you need an extra complicated service for me because he's the Christ, right? No, he toned it down. Take the bread and the cup and remember me. Likewise, I forgot the other illustration I had, but he simplified the memorial. I forgot, just say quick why I mentioned that, I apologize. What was I talking about right before? Oh, baptism. Because, sorry, he could have made you jump through hoops like Naaman. Naaman thought because he just said just dip in the Jordan 7 times, that's too easy. But it's not supposed to be complicated because the Great Commission goes like this. Go into all the world. Make disciples of all people, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything that I've commanded you. And woven into all of these stories about his life is the simplicity with which he said, the one who is faithful over very little, I can trust with much. And one of the reasons why he's simplifying the instruction is he just wants to know, have you really submitted your heart to do the simple things? Because if you haven't submitted your heart to just do the simple things, no matter how absurd they might seem, why would I continue to give you extra rules? If you won't just take the simple things, the bread and the cup, and just change your heart before you get in that water. Because that's a foundation for the more complex things that he's going to ask you to do when life really starts hitting you as a servant of God. And so when we're talking about that whole concept of baptism, there are too many passages in the story of the Bible that help us to understand why Peter's literally going to say, baptism now saves you. I didn't mean to make this a Church of Christ sermon, but that's a Bible principle. So understand. One of the best sermons I ever heard on it came out of Francis Chan. He ain't a Church of Christ preacher, but he started getting invitations to Church of Christ places because of the way he preached it. He was like, okay, when you're asking whether or not you need to get baptized, why are you asking whether or not you need to get baptized? If Peter, the one who had the power to make the lame walk and the blind see, is telling you it literally saves you. Because it goes back to a more fundamental question. Have I really allowed Christ the space in my heart to transform me into what he knows I have the potential to be with his great expectations? I got to stop there because it's eating into your lunchtime. But that's pretty much it. Sometimes it's the simple things through which he decides who it is that he's willing to work with. If we can just obey him as we together stand and sing.